Hello there, this is Coden,
And this is Cassia.
and welcome to The Ebonhawk, a podcast where we discuss the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic games and proposed movie adaptations, as well as Star Wars news. Today we'll be talking about the future of Star Wars movies, Sith Troopers, and past and present, and answer your question. This is episode 10, and this is where the unknown regions begin.
Over the holidays, I saw The Rise of Skywalker again, and I think I enjoyed it more the first time. When I saw it again, I kind of realized the breathtaking, the pace was way too fast, and some of the writing it just felt rushed and kind of hobbled together. It kind of just stuck out more that it's like, oh, they just stumble upon this mystical dagger on Pisana, which leads them to the wreckage, and the knife just aligns perfectly with it. And it just seemed like coincidence upon coincidence upon coincidence. And I think I enjoyed Rise of Skywalker the most, but for me, just seeing it again, it was kind of more just fun to kind of pick it apart rather than just watch it, what were some of your thoughts on seeing it again?
The biggest thing for me was that I was able to watch it in a more quiet setting, and that allowed me to enjoy the movie a little bit more, just to be able to pay attention. A lot of the things that I picked up that were on the more nitpicky side, I kind of picked up already through the first viewing, and have already kind of expressed some of my feedback and thoughts over that from our last episode. So this kind of gave me a little more of an opportunity to look at things that I wasn't really paying attention to, just over initial viewer frustration, and as well as trying to watch the main story and not looking at other background details. So examples is I was able to look at the text crawl and was able to see what that was a little bit more about, and I guess just pick up other details that I missed that people had pointed out, like the Snoke clones and things like that. As far as did I enjoy it more or less, I'd have to say that I pretty well just enjoyed it the same. At that point, I knew what I was getting into. I kind of knew that it was kind of a mediocre movie, and so just seeing it again was primarily to allow me to enjoy it and not have to just be dealing with saber forged lightsabers lighting up all the time, or people just laughing and cheering when they should be paying attention.
Yeah, for me, the sequel trilogy is a bit meh, and I just feel like Rise of Skywalker is meh for me. But I think after 7 was kind of just a sequel to the original trilogies, kind of pretending the prequels didn't exist, and kind of just like a retread of A New Hope, like way too much. And then The Last Jedi was kind of just like, let's do our own thing and kind of just ignore, the rest of the saga. 9 was about as good as we could get. So those are some of my thoughts after the second viewing of The Rise of Skywalker. But seeing The Rise of Skywalker again, it just kind of hit me that the ending, I just really did not enjoy the ending, because Rey, like the whole movie, you hear like, oh, it's all about teamwork and friendship and, the people around you, and like, don't be ashamed of who you are. And then in the end, it's just Rey alone on Tatooine, a planet that means nothing to her. She's just alone. None of her friends that are supposed to mean anything to her are there. She's just a lone woman like she began. And she tells the lady at the end that she's a Skywalker because apparently Luke and Leia are okay with it, and that's how last names work now. I did kind of notice that the people in 9 are like, "Oh, I want to know where your name comes from," And it's like, I don't think anyone should badger people about their last names ever, you know? And I don't feel like that's ever been a thing in Star Wars before now, but I can understand maybe you can't reclaim Palpatine because he's kind of like the Hitler of Star Wars, but maybe she could have just said, I'm just Rey, and because she doesn't need to prove who she is anymore, and she can reject Palpatine, but it doesn't mean she needs to steal the Skywalker name, especially after all the Skywalkers are gone, which I kind of feel bad about. Like, the Skywalker saga just begins with Anakin Skywalker and then his children and his grandchildren, and basically they can't escape the cycle of tragedy. Because I feel like Star Wars is supposed to be a fairy tale. They should have transcended the slavery and the fall of Darth Vader, and I think the Skywalker bloodline deserved to be, happy, like, because Star Wars is meant to be a fairy tale. What did you think about the ending?
The biggest problem with all three of the movies is that there's several points where they want you to feel a particular way about how they present an item, like not knowing who Rey's parents were, her lineage. When they announce that there's a spy in the First Order, and you find out it's Hux, and then how they deal with that whole thing, and then at the end when she announces, hey, my last name is Skywalker, they want you to feel like particular emotions to this story. But for me, part of the problem was the pacing. Part of the problem is that I didn't really care so much in the first place, and so it attempted to try and like resonate with the viewer, but to me it was a near just miss. And if they just made a couple like alterations where maybe she does just say, oh, my name is just Rey to the woman on Tatooine, or if she said, my name is Rey Solo. I've brought up in the past that Han Solo was more of a father figure to Rey.
Yeah.
Then Luke or Leia were parental figures to Rey. Luke was kind of that letdown, and Leia, I think, was kind of like this individual that was just so far beyond Rey that it was almost like Rey was incapable to like look up to her because of just how much different they were. Just immediately at the beginning of the movie, you see that Rey falls short of her perceived expectations from Leia.
And also, I just never felt like I could always just tell like it was recycled footage. With Leia, I just never really bought that they were sharing scenes together.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me out of it.
Yeah.
And besides, like, Leia's last name isn't Skywalker. It's either Organa or Solo, and that's it. It's not Skywalker.
I mean, the maiden name was originally Skywalker, but she was raised in Organa, and then became Solo. So, right. I mean, if she were to pick Skywalker as her chosen given name or surname, it would have been more appropriate for Organa or Solo. And Skywalker, I think, means very little to Rey. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And she could have been Solo because she's alone, because apparently that's how Han Solo got his last name, is because he was alone,
and
he had no people.
That's in both Legends and canon, so like that's just the way it works.
And I just didn't feel like Rey going to a desert planet and walking off into the binary sunset, that's a good ending for maybe Luke Skywalker, but it's not the ending that's appropriate for Rey.
It was also reused footage where they used the wrong landscape for Tatooine. They used the landscape of the planet that Pisana, right? So Pisana with the overlay of the sunset and mountains of Tatooine instead of just the sunset of Tatooine with the regular Tatooine landscape. So that was kind of an oversight and mistake by LucasArts and Disney.
I wonder if it originally pointed to like that ending was kind of made up, like it wasn't the original ending. So I think we'll kind of learn more about the Rise of Skywalker in the years to come and like the sequel trilogy as a whole.
Yeah, well,
So
J.J. Abrams came out in an interview and said that that wasn't the original ending. Like that whole ending sequence was different, but Disney had claimed that it wouldn't make them enough money, and so they had them scrap the proposed ending and replace it with their proposed money making ending, which was the end game ending.
yeah, and I think they really want to have that Skywalker copyrighted name somewhere. So I guess maybe we'll see Ray Skywalker pop up again.
And I do wish
Um,
that the merchandise left the lightsaber as the Luke or Anakin lightsaber and not the Rey lightsaber, because it's not Rey's
he
lightsaber.
didn't make that lightsaber. It's Anakin's. He didn't kill all of those younglings for, like some random person to call it their lightsaber, but at least she made her own lightsaber out of her staff at the end.
Yeah.
So,
It's
and
just
it's
a
yellow.
it's a
So,
very short double bladed lightsaber.
I thought it was just a single bladed, but maybe it is a double bladed,
It's
but
got
they
a
didn't show
it's
they
got an
didn't show both.
emitter
Hmm.
on it's got an emitter on the other end, so she only ignited one end, but it's a
Okay.
symmetrical hilt, so both ends are emitters, and it's just a but it's only big enough to comfortably use in one hand.
I can't wait to pick up Ray's lightsaber from the Disney store. It'll be nice to have a yellow lightsaber option.
Yeah, and I did like that they brought the yellow blade to canon.
Yeah, I mean, it has been canonized in Rebels and Clone Wars because the Jedi Sentinels, like the guards of the Jedi Temple, always had yellow lightsabers, but it's just nice to see it in live action.
Yeah, and in a main character Jedi possession too, because you don't really have a major Jedi character with just anything but a blue or green lightsaber.
Yeah, so it's always nice to have more yellow. And when I saw the yellow lightsaber, I'm like, oh, Basculus Shan is canon! Like, that's just what I saw. So I'm like, yeah, it makes her canon. So, yeah. And in further Rise of Skywalker news, the art book and the official novelization were delayed until spring 2020. So they may be coming out in March. And I don't know if that's because the story was changed kind of last minute and they had to switch some stuff around. But I guess we'll see when they're released what they look like.
Yeah, I just learned
Uh,
about the art book maybe about a week ago, and I haven't really looked at a Star Wars art book since the original trilogy art book, and so I mean it'll be cool when it comes out, but I'd never even looked at the prequel one, and I think I would actually be pretty interested to take a look at that prequel one.
the prequel ones were pretty good. You sometimes learn some alternate ways, like the story could have gone. In some of the concept art, originally Padme was going to come with a knife when she confronted Anakin on Mustafar, and she was going to try and kill him. And I think that could have played out well because I think a little bit in Revenge of the Sith, Padme kind of just went along with things and died of sadness. It would have been cool to kind of see her challenge Anakin more rather than just kind of die of sadness. And she was also, because she was giving birth to two force users, she could feel the force in some concept art. So she was like, originally, like some of the concept art, she was gonna like be with Yoda, and when Order 66 happened, she was gonna be able to feel it because she was just, like high on hormones and metachlorians, so she could feel it. That could have been cool, but that's some of the interesting tidbits you can learn from art books.
Yeah, and I think
So,
the producers that did like the Clone Wars, they I think they did a lot better job portraying Anakin and Padme, both in their
mhm.
relationship, but just them individually. Where Padme was much more of a leader and much more like more sure of herself, and with Anakin, Anakin was just more believable. You could see just his range of emotions, how it kind of drives him. Like it was an interesting take of what the Revenge of the Sith could have been had they went more of kind of a realistic approach.
I still think like Revenge of the Sith is a good movie. I just think the prequel trilogy would have benefited if someone else were directing and writing the scripts. But Anakin and Padme's relationship was definitely strengthened by having the Clone Wars exist, I would say. And one other news tidbit about the future of Star Wars is that supposedly the director of the new Star Wars project will be announced this month in January 2020. And apparently they have 3 movies set for the moment. The first one would come out December 26th, 2022. And the second would come out in December 20th, 2024. And the third in December 18th, 2026. But what is interesting is there is a quote from Kathleen Kennedy. She was talking to the Los Angeles Times, and she said, "I think moving beyond trilogies gives us a more open-ended view of storytelling and doesn't lock us into this 3-act structure. We're not going to have some finite number and fit it into a box. We're really going to let the story dictate that."
Do you think that's Kathleen talking, or do you think that's Disney talking?
I don't know. Because I think no one's ever had a problem with trilogies until the sequel trilogy, really. So we'll just see, because supposedly they already have the trilogy mapped out, the dates. They could just be placeholder dates that can always change. I think if you have an outline and you know where you're going and you have a story that needs to be told, not just a story that you want told so you can pay off your $4 billion business deal and merchandise things as soon as possible, I think trilogies work. But it'll be interesting to see if Disney does move forward with just some one-offs like Rogue One or Solo, or if they'll just like have a trilogy after this.
I think they're basing it off of the failure of the Disney Skywalker trilogy, because they tried to do 3 movies and 3 directors, but they ended up doing the 3 movies and 2 directors and writing the story as they go. And I think they're making an assumption off of the product of that. And maybe they don't have to do trilogies going forward, but maybe if they just gave a director more creative freedom, maybe let's do a story touching on this era or topic and left it to like a director and a writer to put something together. And if it ends up being 2 or 3 movies, then it ends up being 2 or 3 movies. But if it ends up just being 1 or 6 or 7, it could be that. But I think what's more important is if there's a particular story that they want to tell in the Star Wars universe, if they stuck with one director for that story and then let another director maybe attack a different portion of the story and kind of go that way, I think that would be a bit better of an approach than just saying we have now found out that trilogies don't work, so we're no longer going to do trilogies.
I think trilogies work fine, and they're a fulfilling way to tell stories and to partake of stories.
It's kind of like the 5-paragraph essay in school.
Yeah.
Where
like, it's not broke. Don't fix it, because it's fine. If you're worried about it, you're doing it wrong, I think.
and a 5-paragraph essay isn't always 5 paragraphs too. You could have a 10-paragraph, but it's just a structure, right? You've got the opening act that sets up what the story is going to be about. You've got the middle act that kind of just lays out maybe a little bit more groundwork in detail of kind of the what's happened and this is what's happening. And then you have the cap, which is the climax and the resolution. And that's how a trilogy is supposed to work. And what we saw was of 3 approaches to tell a story trying to be a trilogy, and it was just 3 approaches to tell a story.
Yeah. We'll get into this more in the future. Both of us are hoping is that the next trilogy is Knights of the Old Republic, because the first one could just be like setting up like the hero's journey. You learn who the team is, and then in the second one it's kind of when poop hits the fan, things get really bad. And then in the third one is you have the conclusion, the epic conclusion, and the redemption. So I think it could work to have KOTOR, the first Knights of the Old Republic, broken up into a trilogy. So I hope that's what happens, and I hope they have people who are passionate about the lore and the story, and that people make outlines.
It's unfortunate that J.J. Abrams has expressed that he doesn't want to do another Star Wars movie, and I think that has everything to do with what happened with this one. Like I said earlier, I think if Disney just allowed more creative control, Disney and LucasArts, I mean, we could put both of them on the table, but if they allow more creative control for a director to tell the story they want to tell, I would love to see another attempt by J.J. Abrams to tell a different Star Wars story. And the same would go with Rian Johnson. You know, apparently he scored a huge hit with this other movie he produced, this Knives Out movie. And
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
And right, so I mean, he's not a bad director. I just think that he had a different idea of what a Star Wars movie should be, and it just didn't mesh well with trying to tell a story in the format of a trilogy.
Yeah,
And
I think he would be an excellent Star Wars director, just not an excellent fit with legacy characters. Because I think visually he has a great panache and a good match, but I just didn't like some of the story choices he made. And I just think if he maybe would have done something else in the Star Wars universe, it would have been a better fit. It'll be interesting to see what the future holds. Personally, I'm okay with J.J. Abrams leaving, but the thing is, why Lucas produced his own films is so he wouldn't be told by a corporation what to do. And now he sold Disney Star Wars, and Disney can dictate what they want people to do. So it's kind of sad, like, to see creative control take a hit.
well, yeah, I mean, if J.J. Abrams doesn't want to do Star Wars, he's not going to do Star Wars. But you know, I thought he did a fine job with his attempt to reboot Star Trek. The first film was great. The other two, not so much. But
Yeah, I don't think he did the third of the new Star Trek films, but he did Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness.
mhm.
And I didn't really like Star Trek Into Darkness, but I found Star Trek to be a good reboot.
Yeah, I think
So,
that was just a product of the first one being very successful, and they tried to milk it for more money, and just kind of maybe because it definitely wasn't a trilogy; it was just a sequel and a sequel. So just kind of a stack of movies, similar to what Marvel's been doing with their Avenger characters. His initial attempt, the original Star Trek reboot, was you have the big Star Trek people that didn't care for it, but I think for capturing a new audience and getting people interested in the idea of Star Trek, I thought J.J. Abrams did a solid job with that.
it revitalized the brand. So, we just hope that wherever the future of Star Wars is going, it's going to be good. The Rise of Skywalker featured Sith troopers. This isn't the first time they've existed in the Star Wars story, but the Sith troopers in Rise of Skywalker are the first canon Sith troopers. The Sith troopers in the Rise of Skywalker, I feel like they kind of just existed to sell Funko Pops. What did you think?
The thing that stuck out to me the most was, why are they red? I mean, of course you have the Royal Guard that are red, but why is a whole battalion of troopers red? I mean, red is the easiest color for your eye to pick out, which makes them the easiest targets to shoot down. So
Yeah. At first, I thought there was gonna be like Kylo Ren leading the white stormtroopers or First Order troopers, and Palpatine was going to be leading the red Sith troopers, and I was like, oh, visually that makes sense to have white versus red so you can differentiate between them. But that didn't happen, so they're kind of just like red because they are red because they were called Sith troopers. And why are they called Sith troopers? Because.
Yeah, it's a great question. The lightsabers are red, so the stormtroopers will be too. Yeah, I mean, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, the original Sith on Korriban were red, but yeah.
The Emperor's Guard were originally red, but it's just a unanswered question, I think, and so like we've been knocking on it a little bit, but in reality, I just think it's just something that maybe they're just red because they're red. I mean, I guess even the clone battalion from the prequels, the guard that was like the Emperor's personal battalion wore red stripes. So maybe it's just been the thing with the Republic and the Empire is that those that are closest to the Senate and the Emperor have the red marking.
Well, the Senate and the Emperor are the same person. No, just kidding. Um, and also, like in the Rise of Skywalker, it's never really explained like where all these ships come from, and they're all just suddenly manned. So I just wonder, like, if they're just hanging out in the unknown regions, or they come out of ice, and they're all just, staffed with people.
Yeah,
So
I think
that's a
staffing
wrinkle.
is the most like unrealistic. I mean, they talk a little bit how the new Star Destroyers are more automated, which would make more sense that it doesn't take tens of thousands of crew members to pilot a Star Destroyer like an original Star Destroyer, where most of that could be done by AI or by droids. And the design of the Star Destroyer also was just kind of like a revitalization of the first Imperial Star Destroyer, which you see in Rogue One, but it's bigger. It's just scaled up bigger. And so I
And it
think
has Death Star power
yeah, it's got that
now.
laser cannon at the bottom. So I think as far as innovation goes, I don't think there was a ton of innovation to the new Star Destroyer, but it was just bigger with one big weapon at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't think they needed like the Death Star capabilities in The Rise of Skywalker. It just seemed like a little bit too much.
It's just the big giant ball wasn't working anymore. So now they made a million wedges with the
Yeah.
super
I
laser.
just I just think that the Death Star is played out. Like it was played out in episode 7 with the Star Killer base. Like I just don't think we needed to have them have Death Star cannons.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Sith Troopers, they were designed by concept artist Glenn Dillon and sculpted by Sam Williams, and the Sith Trooper costume was designed by Michael Kaplan. They look more like clone troopers than stormtroopers. The clone troopers were a mix of like the stormtroopers and Jango Fett, and these I would say they're a mix of clone troopers and the color red. You know,
One
uh,
thing that I noticed with them is their armor looked more solid than the First Order Trooper. I felt like the First Order Trooper was they like
looked
draped.
like an iPhone.
Yeah, maybe like the iPhone 5C, like the really plastic, colorful iPhone.
Yeah,
Just kind of like that plastic draped over their shoulders as their protective plate. Or the new Sith Trooper felt more like it was a more rugged design. It looked like there was just more armor on each trooper.
and also speaking of the Sith troopers' armor, stormtroopers were designed to look like skeletons, kind of to evoke evil and to scare people. It's an iconic design. The Sith troopers are designed to look more like muscles. Like that's why they're red, and they kind of have some lines on the armor that kind of evoke the imagery of muscles. It also reminded me of the Bolton's emblem from Game of Thrones, like the flayed man. That was kind of an interesting development. Maybe in one of these sequel trilogy spin-offs we'll see a skin inspired trooper. That would be frightening.
The most unrealistic thing about that whole sequence was the amount of people that they showed off that were part of that new fleet. Staff Commandex, the battalion of Sith troopers. I think everything else could be explained, but except for that.
I'm sure it'll be explained in like some book or comic book or whatever, but I feel like the movie should stand on its own. Like I shouldn't have to look at some other instance in the canon to have the movie make sense. The movie should make sense on its own. But also, the Sith troopers are divided into legions of 5,000. They are known numerically by a number and also a Sith Lord's name. And from the visual dictionary, some Sith Lords from canon are recanonized. And the most important is the Third Legion is named after Revan from Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. So he's officially back in the canon and we're never letting him go again. So, but he was always canon in my heart. The Fifth Legion is named after Andedu. He was the first immortal god king of the Prakith. He was like the first Darth, you could say. The 17th Legion is named after Tanis, who existed about 3966 before Battle of Yavin. He developed the Kyber weaponry on Malachor, so I guess you could say, like, the Sith have always been working on Death Stars, like the Death Star technology, trying to amplify that. And then the 26th Legion was named after Tenebrous, who was Darth Plagueis' master. So it's good to have Plagueis becoming more and more canon in the new canon. And then the 39th Legion is named after Phobos, which means fear in, I believe, Greek. And she is a Thelan from The Force Unleashed. And the 44th Legion is named after Decius, who was a Pauan Jedi master until he turned to the dark side, and he was also from The Force Unleashed. So combine that with the Flame Trooper from The Mandalorian, and The Force Unleashed is having a bit of a moment, so I'd love to see it become canon again. And the 105th Legion was made up of Sith troopers and Sith jet troopers because they fly now.
They fly now?
They fly now. I mean, they've always flown, but apparently you're not gonna buy the toy unless you know they fly now. So
it's like in the original Battlefront, you had the jet troopers, and it's like they've been flying for a long time.
And even like elsewhere in the Disney's new canon, Poe Dameron has seen them fly, so it shouldn't be a surprise. So, and that concludes the new Sith troopers from the Rise of Skywalker.
We've had a chance to talk about the reintroduction of Sith troopers with the Rise of Skywalker, so we're going to kind of take a step back to the origins of the Sith trooper, where they're brought up in KOTOR. So, Cassie, why don't you take it away with the origins of the Sith trooper?
They really don't have anything in common other than the name, but the OG Sith troopers are the best Sith troopers, and they don't just exist to sell Funko Pops. So the Sith troopers were the infantry armed forces from the Sith Empire. They're volunteers. They didn't have the Force. They were just normal soldiers. They were founded by Darth Revan. They were traitorous members of the Republic Army that followed Malak and Revan when they fought the Mandalorian Wars. And after Revan and Malak turned to the dark side, they either were killed off or they joined him, and they were seen as kind of just expendable grunts and, evil by the Republic. Later on in KOTOR 2, they also appear because they fought for the Sith Triumvirate. Most of the Sith troopers appear to be silver or white, and I think they're meant to be more silver than anything. It was meant to evoke like the medieval shining armor, kind of more a medieval take on Star Wars. So that's what they were going for, and underneath the silvery armor, They had black padding and visors that covered their face. And depending on if a Sith trooper was a Sith elite troop or a Sith commando, they could appear red or copper. And I think they were meant to appear more red. So perhaps Disney Lucasfilm was inspired by the Sith troopers in Knights of the Old Republic when they were designing their Sith troopers. But some of the different variants of Sith troopers were Sith commandos, Sith elite gunners, Sith heavy troopers, Sith grenadiers, and Sith wranglers, and Sith advanced troopers. They're probably the most common, other than Dark Jedi, of people you'll confront in Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, and we love them.
Yeah, just looking at one of these tile images here from the original game is like this Sith Trooper here kind of has a mix of red and copper, and it almost looks kind of like the scheme of Iron Man. So I think it would be weird had they used a mix of red and copper for the new Sith Trooper. It may have just hit that note of, hey, these are like a bunch of Iron Man, especially if some of them were flying around as jet troopers. So I think maybe sticking to a solid red was maybe a little bit more smart, so it didn't look like it was the same color palette.
Even though Disney owns, Iron Man, so they could have gotten away with it looking like Iron Man.
Yeah, it just would have maybe struck people a bit more wrong than just having it solid red, I think.
Yeah. So the solid red does look better than kind of the copper and red. So, yeah, the OG Sith Troopers will hopefully be canon again one day, along with Revan.
So we're going to move to our last topic tonight. It's from Ryan Flash 123. He had a question for us, and again, he just sent us this question, I think, through Instagram. And if the questions arise that you want to bring to us, our Instagram is a great platform to do so. But we also have the email, which we'll cover at the end of our discussion. But his question was, what happened to Lord Vitiate, Lord Scourge, and Revan after the big fight? And Cassia, what were some of the thoughts that you gathered on that question?
This happens at the end of the Revan novel. Revan, Mitra, and Scourge approach Vitiate, or Vitiate, and while Revan fights Vitiate, Mitra and Scourge fought his guards. Revan fought against Vitiate and then managed to redirect some lightning at him, but Revan found himself, overpowered, and he was almost killed, only to be blocked by the Exile, who had just kind of killed the guards with the help of Scourge. Just when it looks like they're about to fight Vitiate 3-on-1, Scourge sees vision of Vitiate defeated in the future. So Scourge just decides to kill the Exile because he doesn't want to be punished by the Emperor. So bye-bye, Exile. It kind of sucks. That's how she dies. I kind of have some problems with the Revan novel, and that's one of them. So Vitiate uses the opportunity to knock Revan unconscious, and then Revan is in prison, and then he's tortured by Vitiate for about 300 years, which leads up to Star Wars: The Old Republic. So that's kind of the gist I got, and hopefully that answers the question. Did you have any additional thoughts, Coden?
I'm actually surprised that Vitiate was a Sith. He kind of looked like a Republic soldier from all the promotional material.
He looks like a nice guy dressed in white, so he just seems trustworthy.
Well, and the promotional material of the Old Republic, there's the expansion where you've got the two brothers, and they're trying to please this overbearing father figure, which is Lord Vitiate, and one is good, and the other one it kind of like embraces his dark side, and it seems like both of them kind of fall short of Vitiate, but in the end, the one that kind of succumbs to the dark side ends up delivering a killing blow to his brother, and then is basically like acknowledged by his father finally. And so, I mean, maybe he was a Sith the whole time, and I just kind of misread the ad, because at the time I hadn't really played any of the Old Republic when I had saw the ad, and when I started dabbling with the MMO, like I haven't gotten to any of that source material where he's actually relevant. But I think through this question is like, oh, this guy's a Sith. That whole thing is a Sith perspective. So it ends up being kind of this like an every man for himself type battle from the information that I was looking at, with Tenebrae Vitiate, Revan, and the Exile, and it ends up it does claim the life of Revan. So Revan gets captured initially and he gets broken out, but then he kind of dies through his escape. And they go on talking about how part of Revan lives on his dark side self, kind of latches on to an artifact as the Sith do, whereas the Jedi part of him goes off to be part of the Force. As far as the Exile, I didn't really find a lot over the Exile or Gurge, other than Vitiate just kind of comes out on top in the end, and just continues to rule the Sith Empire as he does.
Yeah. The Exile kind of just dies and then like appears like as a Force ghost to Revan while he's being tortured. So I just wish they could have like had something better for her to do than just die and be a Force ghost.
Yeah, and I should probably pick up the Revan novel and take a look and see what that perspective is, but I haven't had a lot of time to read books and been playing KOTOR, so
yeah,
almost done with the Fallen Order and back to the KOTOR grind, I guess.
Hopefully that answers Ryan Flash 123's question.
Thank you everybody for joining in. We've been able to talk about the future of Star Wars, the Sith Trooper perspective from the Rise of Skywalker, as well as KOTOR. And again, thanks Ryan for sending us your question. This has been Coden.
This has been Cassia.
And you can find us on twitch.tv/CodenBond to catch just various Star Wars games streaming. Currently it's Jedi Fallen Order. That's going to move back over to KOTOR 2 once we get Fallen Order out of the way.
And then you can email us your comments and questions at ebonhawkpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also like our photos, our stories, and submit comments and questions on Instagram at ebonhawkpodcast.
And our intro and outro themes were composed by Alistair Shorman, and he can be found at https://alistairsounds.wixsite.com/alistairsounds. And our transition music was composed by Christian Walker, and he can be found at christianwalkermusic.com. This has been episode 10 of the Ebon Hawk. Take care of yourselves, meatbags, and may the Force be with you. We'll be back soon, and bye for now.